sitting in my garden in the shade. It's finally feeling like summer here in the south of England today. It's really hot. And I have my Foxy mask and my ears. So I'm getting in the spirit to introduce you to our guide, Red Fox, who is one of the most famous tricksters in folklore, and as a real creature living in our landscape, invites us to consider our relationship to play. So we're going to dive in and get to know Red Fox. I wanted to start with a little story about a foxy encounter. So, it's a few years ago now. I was living in Cornwall, and I came up to London on the train to visit some friends. And I had this amazing experience with a fox. I was visiting a friend who lived in a flat, and thinking about it and trying to imagine the height, it must have been sort of 5 or 6 stories up their flat. And it was February, and snow was forecast. And snow is not a particularly common thing in the south of England. It causes chaos when we do get it, but we don't get very much, so it was quite exciting. We were drinking red wine, and every so often we'd peek out the windows and just check, has it snowed yet? Has it snowed yet? And the final time we checked, and we missed it really, we must have missed the beginning of it, because the final time we checked there was about an inch of snow, which is quite a lot for us. And it had covered, I can see it so clearly, it covered the street and the cars and the pavements, and everything was under street lights, so it was kind of glowing, very orange, and we were so excited, and the fat flakes were falling down, and this beautiful urban fox appeared, and they looked so well and healthy and so fluffy, and they were padding around, and they were the only footprints in the snow. There were no cars moving or anything. It was just this little fox padding around in the snow, and we got very excited. And I don't know if they heard us. They have incredible hearing, but they looked up at us in this 5th-story window in a block of flats, and it was like they could see us. They were looking right at us, and they stayed and they stared for a good 30 seconds or so. It was long, and we were kind of like caught in this kind of mesmerizing moment with this beautiful wild urban creature. And then they padded off on their way. And when I got back to Cornwall, I did a painting of them. I tried to kind of capture the magicalness of the orange. The snow looked orange as it was falling in the streetlights, and this fox just staring. And that was kind of towards the end of my living in Cornwall. I ended up living in London for a little bit later that year, and the fox just felt like a really powerful symbol. I found living in London quite hard, and foxes are amazing at it. And that kind of adaptability, and sort of there's a ruggedness to them that I found really inspiring. So that's my little foxy story. And then we're going to dive in and learn a bit more about these amazing animals. So around the world there are 12 different fox species, and there are 45 subspecies of red fox. We're going to be focusing on red foxes. I'm going to be talking about sort of my experiences and my local ones, but of course, as always, the invitation is there if you want to tune into foxes more local to you. The range of the red fox is pretty huge. They are found pretty much all across the Northern Hemisphere, and here in the UK it's only the Scottish Islands, I think, where they're not found. They are incredibly adaptable. They are members of the canid family, so along with dogs and wolves, and you can see that in them. They have a sort of like mini wolf vibe a little bit, don't they? I always think of them as having a bit of like a cat cross dog sort of a feel to them. We say red fox, and that is their subspecies name, but they're not necessarily always red. The kind of stereotype is this kind of colouring with the white lower face and the deep russetty fur, but they can be shades of grey, even black, and still be in the red fox family. So from a conservation point of view, they are thought to be doing well. They can adapt to almost anywhere. They are causing a problem in some countries where they've been introduced, which you can imagine. A small, voracious little predator gets introduced to an island where there's been no predators filling that niche before. It's going to be tricky. And their numbers do fluctuate. They can have diseases and problems, and of course their main issue is tension with us, so we're going to talk about that a little bit too. Let's start tuning in and learning what these amazing creatures can teach us about this time of year. So if we come back to this concept of umwelt, the idea of the sensory world as perceived by a particular creature, from a fox perspective, the world is rich with information and stories. Like other members of the dog family, if you have a dog, you'll have seen the incredible sense of smell and the incredible hearing. Foxes have similar. So the world is just full for them in ways that we can't perceive. If you've ever seen there's some kind of famous video clips, isn't there, of them hunting mice in the snow, and the snow can be quite thick, and they're able to track with their hearing where the mice are moving under the snow. So they're mostly active at night, but they can be spotted in the daytime. I know people quite often see them sunbathing at this time of year, just kind of chilling out. They are able to run really fast. They can navigate using all their senses. They can climb almost any fence. They can dig. They can swim. They're just incredibly adaptable and sensitive and smart, and that information is coming in from their environment all the time, and they're able to listen to it and act very quickly. So it's a conversation. It's not just a kind of a sponging of all that information. They're learning and they're choosing all the time, and they have these incredible powers of being very strong and very bouncy and very determined to use their senses. So there's this gorgeous invitation from them, particularly as almost imperceptibly at the moment we are moving towards a darker time of year. That darkness is getting mixed in a little bit more. So we've got a nocturnal crepuscular, it's one of my favourite words, animal that loves moving around in the dark. It can be a great time to be thinking about our relationship to darkness, both metaphorical and physical, planning a little bit about how to adapt to the shorter days as they're coming later in the year, and thinking about our relationship to some of the things in our world that we label as darker, some of the themes and emotions that we maybe put in the shadows. Another aspect of fox is they've got this incredible sensory equipment in their nose and their ears, and they are probably some of the least fussy eaters on the planet. They're a carnivore, they're an omnivore, they have incredible immune systems and very strong stomachs, so there's very little that they won't try and eat. Their diet in the wild, in more rural locations, is like 95% meat, so small mammals and birds. And then as they move into the more urban areas, their diet gets more mixed, and they're very famous for eating food waste and things like that, aren't they? If there's any chance of getting food, they're going to find it. And that smartness, some call it laziness, I don't really like that word, but that smartness is they're going to go for what's easiest, and that nose is going to help them find it. So I absolutely love this aspect of them, and I think it's part of where their cunning, tricksy reputation comes from, is this not fussiness, this kind of determination, and the opportunisticness of fox. So I think that's where they get this label of kind of being tricksy or too clever by half. If you have chickens, it is incredibly difficult to keep them out. They are a small, smart, adaptable carnivore, and they're going to find their way in. So it becomes a bit of like a one-upmanship battle, doesn't it, between the people with the chickens and the people with the foxes, trying to keep them out. And yeah, that's hard. That's tricky for the chickens, and that's tricky for the people looking after the chickens. So I think that's partly where that reputation comes from. So there's a really nice invitation from them to think about putting ourselves in foxes' shoes. Imagine them with little shoes on. Putting ourselves in their paws, imagining the world when we tune into our senses more. Our senses are never going to be as good as theirs, but I feel like when we slow down, when we take the time to sniff and savor, we can get more information in through our senses than we do when we're moving fast. And to think about this thing around pickiness or not pickiness. Are you being a bit too fussy sometimes, or are you more like fox? Are you just, you'll just take it all, crunch the bones and all? I kind of love that question. There's something there to ponder around your relationship to what you will take in, whether it's food or something else, and whether you're kind of a bit, no, not like that. Loud glory. So yeah, there's this lovely invitation to ponder pickiness as a theme, and your senses and how much you're using them, and how cunning you are at getting what you want. What are your chickens, and what will you climb and dig and burrow through to get them? How is your problem solving, and how could you kind of boost that smart part of your brain? So in the fox life cycle, in summer, it is a world of rich abundance. All the baby birds and baby mammals and all the things that are breeding are all on the dinner plate. And their own young are born earlier in the year, and at this time they're learning to hunt and they're learning to become more and more independent. So that was also one of the reasons why I wanted to include them this month, is that although there's still a bit of that sense of vulnerability that we had with Swallow, and the kind of ideas around baby animals and that sort of, are they going to make it feeling. For fox, if it's kind of like summertime and the living is easy, there's that juiciness around them that they are able to make the most of, and those senses, that problem solving. There's just so much more food around, there's so much more abundance, there's so much more available to them. You can go and snack on some yummy fruit, pick off a couple of baby rabbits, go and snooze in the sun somewhere. And I love that. I felt like the invitation from them to enjoy this time of year, to like enjoy the abundance and juiciness, is a really delicious one, and I'm really grateful for them to showing up like right now. So I was like, what are you doing here? And they were like, we love summer. We want to come and talk about it. So it's kind of, I get the animals kind of pop in and have a lot to say, and fox particularly this moon was like very chatty, and that's part of their charm and part of their life cycle as well. We've recognized as humans 28 different vocalizations that foxes can make to each other, but they also use body language and facial expressions, and smell is really important to them. They've got scent glands in their paws and in different parts of their body, so they are telling each other stories all the time. that can be picked up through all of their senses, and they are loud. So that was another aspect as well, was this kind of chattiness, and this urge to communicate at this juicy, abundant time of year.